In our two most recent programs, we discussed Grenada's state of affairs re-COVID-19 on the social front and what's happening with the reopening of schools. Tonight, we turn our attention to our brothers and sisters around the Caribbean region. Trinidad has a huge spike. Montserrat will reopen schools on Monday, while Jamaica keeps the classrooms shut. Anguilla has put a pause on some activities, and St. Lucia is off and on some travel listings. Let's see how the islands are faring tonight. Let's welcome tonight's panelists: Janeka Simon, Choice TV St. Lucia; James White Jr., ZJB Radio Montserrat; Alicia Boucher, TV6 Trinidad; Keatstone Greaves, Radio Anguilla; Milton Walker, TVJ Jamaica. Good evening, everyone. We have the introductions out of the way, and we're dealing with some journalists who are extremely busy, so we're jumping right in. Panelists, good evening, and how are you today?
Thank you.
Evening.
Great. Yes, good evening.
Right.
Good evening.
So a lot is happening around the Caribbean. Apart from COVID, there is elections taking place in Jamaica. Elections have just gone about 2 weeks ago in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's start with Jamaica, because I understand my guest from St. Lucia has to ship on out. So Milton Walker, what's up?
Good evening.
And
well, we're in the middle of an election campaign, and also in the middle of a major spike in cases. COVID-19 cases. Yesterday, we had our biggest number reported, 245 new cases. Our total now is 2,357, including 21 deaths. We have 890 recoveries, and right now there are 1,374 active cases. We also have a number of measures which are island-wide and some are parish-specific. For example, there are 4 parishes: the capital, that's Kingston and St. Andrew, known as the corporate area; St. Catherine, the second biggest parish, certainly in terms of population, and Clarendon, the third biggest parish in terms of population as well, and St. Thomas, all 4 on a 7 to 5 a.m. curfew, and that will end on Wednesday. The rest of the island is on a 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew, and that will come to an end on the 31st of September. The capital, St. Catherine, Clarendon, and St. Thomas will revert to, I think, to the 9 p.m. curfew on Thursday. Thursday, of course, is election day. Today we had members of the security forces and the special electors, that's the persons who are working on election day for the Electoral Office of Jamaica, they voted today.
So,
I'm sorry, you're saying something?
What is happening with schools? When will schools be reopened in Jamaica?
Initially, it was scheduled for next week, Monday, the 7th of September, but a couple weeks ago, it was pushed back to the 5th of October. So that's where we are right now. Given the spike, and if it continues, there are fears that may be pushed back further as well.
And how are people responding to having a curfew in place in some of the parishes up to this date? I mean, it's been from March to now.
Mm-hmm. Well, initially we were on a very hard curfew, 7, and I think at one point it was 8. Then 9, and then more recently they had been relaxed just before Independence and Emancipation Day. It had been relaxed to 11 o'clock, and so you had a lot of restaurants and places where you could have a lime and have a drink. They were opened, but given the spike, the government has tightened those restrictions, and of course, with a curfew at 7 or at 9, business places essentially have to close 2 hours before it, so in order for staff to get home safely before the curfew. One of the other challenges that we face also, by the way, there are some other measures, like there are no funerals. You can only have a graveside ceremony, and only 15 persons are allowed, family and the persons who are putting the coffin in the grave, that will be allowed. We had a story this evening about a funeral in Kingston, and we could see quite a bit more than 15 persons at that funeral, and none of them wore masks. That's been a big challenge. And today, the police arrested 10 persons in Halfway Tree, which is one of the centers of the capital. They were arrested 10 persons under the Disaster Risk Management Act order for not wearing masks, and the police say they will continue to enforce that. I went into Halfway Tree around 3 o'clock this afternoon and went to my barber, and I could see most persons were wearing masks. There were still a few, but I would say we're about 85%, maybe 90% compliant in that area. And Halfway Tree, of course, is a major square, major area.
All right, so you're talking about the police making some arrests, and I want to crave your indulgence, ask you to stick around for a few minutes. We want to go to a report that we had out of Jamaica last week. You, musical people full of vibe, had a lot of action going on. Your star athlete, Usain Bolt, Beanie Man, all of these people. Yeah, you're smiling, and yeah, let's take a snippet of that report, and we'll come back and discuss that with you and ask you to explain what's happening here. Can we have the producer assist us with that at this time, please?
If there's one thing Jamaicans know how to do, it's party. Like clockwork, parties are held week after week. Then came COVID-19, forcing people to stay indoors, wear masks, and stand 6 feet apart, upending the party scene as we know it. Or did it? This was Usain Bolt's 34th birthday party in full swing on August 21. In a 2-minute 30-second video posted on Instagram on Sunday, the COVID-19 breaches were glaring. No physical distancing as the music blared. We spotted only 2 persons wearing masks, but Usain Bolt was not among them. Not even the DJ was protected. Among those present, popular entertainers like Ding Dong and the Ravers, Chris Martin, and footballers Leon Bailey and Raheem Sterling, all front and center, having their fair share of droplets. Of concern, too, is whether or not Raheem Sterling broke quarantine protocols to attend the party. Sterling, who plays for English team Manchester City, played in the semi-finals of the Champions League in Portugal on August 16, 5 days before the party. It's mandatory for all visitors to the island to be quarantined for 14 days. Usain Bolt's party is not the only event staged by well-known Jamaicans which showed a wanton disregard for the health protocols. This video was posted on Beanie Man's Instagram page over the weekend after his birthday bash. Clear breaches of the COVID-19 protocols. Music, check. Entertainment, check. Masks, missing. Physical distancing, not on this porch. His partner and PNP candidate for West Rural St. Andrew, Crystal Tomlinson, was also at the party, shuffling through the patrons. Yes, without a mask. At one point, even touching her face. Other dancehall artists such as Kemar Haikon and Conscience were also present. They engaged in close conversation. Others were busy covering the ground, but not their faces as they move around the dance floor. For social media users, Beanie Man was sharing the love, especially in this video with his former dancehall rival Bounty Killer. But no concerns about the spread of the virus. The government reopened the entertainment sector in July, allowing for events with a limit of 280 persons, with all the health protocols observed. For instance, visible signs and markings on the ground to ensure physical distancing. The health ministry has since revised some of the health protocols as the cases continued to climb. Alicia Williams, TVJ News.
So, Milton, some explanations there? Some great dance moves there, boy?
Yeah, Jamaicans, I would say we all in the Caribbean like a party effect. People have been locked up, and unfortunately some persons weren't adhering to the protocols. The government did grant entertainers license to have parties with maximum of 200 persons, but they had to keep them in venues where they'd be able to have, proper physical distancing. However, on those 2 occasions, which they, brazenly posted them on social media because we were monitoring specifically, because a lot of them were taken down, I must tell you, but our team was actively managing and watching them on the weekend. And the funny thing also, there are some persons who were at the Usain Bolt party who were also at the Beanie Man party the following day. So there was a lot of cross-fertilization in terms of, possibly spreading the virus. And a number of persons, I think, Usain Bolt has been positive, and quite a few other persons have been in quarantine and have been tested. Those are private individuals, some of them, so we really don't know what their test results are. So it really was quite irresponsible, and they were pretty much condemned. I must say, Crystal Tomlinson, who is the president of the PMP-YO, that's the opposition party youth arm, and she's the candidate for West Rural St. Andrew, and she's Beanie Man's partner. She was at that party without mask. She did apologize on the following Monday, and said she, on reflection, she was irresponsible, and she apologized for that.
And finally, how has COVID-19 impacted the Jamaican economy?
Well, certainly for us, the big hit has been to tourism. We had at one point over 300,000 workers in the tourist sector, both in terms of hotels and attractions and support industries who were without or out of work. There's been a reopening, but on a limited scale. The best in terms of hotel occupancy that I've heard has been somewhere in the high 20s. But a lot of hotels, by the way, have simply not opened. They are scheduled to open in September, and some, I think, even October. Some haven't given a scheduled date. But quite a number have opened, and those that are open initially, they were like 10%, 12%, but it's been creeping up. However, given our spike, and Britain, for example, putting Jamaica on one of the countries where you have to have a mandatory 14-day quarantine on your return, that's going to eliminate Jamaica from a lot of British visitors. And I think this morning we reported that TUI, which is a big UK tour group, taking Jamaica off their one of the countries that they're recommending their travelers go to. So we're losing out on that market. But a fair amount of Americans are coming, and what we've had a huge number of, and many believe they're responsible for the spike, because the spike hasn't been linked to tourists. The spike has been linked to Jamaicans who live abroad and perhaps are citizens, particularly of the United States. They have been coming back in large numbers over the last two and a half months, and they've been going to parties, they've been going to funerals, rivers, beaches, and just not observing the protocols, also not observing the 14-day quarantine period, because I know I've seen some of them. You see when they post when they land in Jamaica, and then 2-3 days later, they're out and about at a beach or at an event, and they're posting it on social media. What the government had done was you had to register with an app, and your phone was geo-linked to the location, the address where you're staying, and you had to provide all that and show the persons at the airport that you were going to stay at this address somewhere, whether it's in Kingston or St. Catherine or wherever. And when you went, it would just automatically ping and register you there, and you had to give updates, say, every 2-3 hours with a video message. What we heard, or what we felt a lot of persons were doing, was simply leaving the phone at home, their smartphone at home, and going out, and then coming back when they were given a message again. They said, "Oh, I was asleep," or I fell asleep, or I forgot. And so I think that's so many had circumvented that process in order for them to be monitored. They've talked about perhaps using ankle bracelets, but I think that's a whole system which would require a fair amount of expenditure, and of course with our revenues severely impacted. In fact, I don't think that's going to be possible. The Bank of Jamaica last week said at a press conference, that's a central bank, that the economy is likely to contract to with well over 10%.
Okay. All right, so thank you so much for that, Milton. We know that you're in the middle of elections cycle and you have those debates to go and take care of, and we want to thank you so much for joining us.
Our debates are done now.
Well,
our debates are done. We had the last one on Saturday, the leaders debate. So we had a finance minister's debate last Thursday and the team debate on Tuesday on social issues.
All right. All the best, and we'll be talking with you again sometime. Right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We were speaking there with Milton Walker. We had to take all of Jamaica in one bite because it's the election cycle and it's a very busy time for them. So let's continue, and we're going now to Anguilla, a place that we hardly hear from in the Caribbean, and beyond the headlines, we're breaking barriers. And I am pleased to introduce a gentleman who, those of us in Grenada who are over the age of 20, let me just say, those of us who are over the age of 20, will know the name. We have with us Mr. Keystone Greaves from Radio Antilles Days. That's where I know the name. And next to him, we have Mr. James White Jr. So those are two of the stalwarts in the media industry in the Caribbean. And we have the two young ones, you know. We have Janeka James out of St.Luica and Alicia Boucher out of our sister station, TV6. We hear Alicia's reports frequently in the GBN Caribbean segment. James Anguilla, what's up, boy? That should be Keith Anguilla. Keith, constituencies getting mixed up. Why?
All right. I know, that's fine. That's fine. Yes, good evening to you, Odette, and good evening to your viewers. It's certainly good to been invited to come on the program this evening. As it relates to Anguilla, well, Anguilla, like most of the Caribbean, going through the difficulties posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. As far as it stands currently, Anguilla has been declared, and this is has been widely reported, as one of the areas that is COVID-free, according to the WHO and PAHO and the local health officials here. So Anguilla has been declared COVID-free, at least for the time being. We had 3 initial active cases. That was very early on, about April this year, but those 3 persons have since recovered. We're into a period now where the island has been closed, the main seaport, which is the gateway to neighboring St. Martin, Dutch and French St. Martin, has been closed, and also our main airport, the Clayton J. Lloyd International Airport, that too has been closed in recent months. However, within the last few weeks, the new government, we had elections here as well. I heard you mention elections around the Caribbean region, Jamaica being the latest to come up this week. Just had Trinidad and Tobago. But we had elections at the end of June, and a new government was installed. We have a new government, and part of the program of the new government now is to quietly and efficiently reintroduce persons coming back in. I say that in a twofold kind of a way. One, Anguilla goes for the high-end tourists. We have some very, very large resorts, hotel complex on our coastline, and we are very heavily into the tourist business. Tourism accounts for perhaps 90% of the foreign exchange into Anguilla is via tourism. But those major hotels, resorts have been closed since earlier this year, since the end of the last season. And it's very unlikely that they'll be open for the new season, which comes up in November, thereabouts. So those areas are closed. So what the new government has sought to do is to quietly look into the reopening of the villas. Again, Anguilla caters for a lot of the jet setters, some of the people rich and famous, people who tend to visit Anguilla for the quiet, tranquility, and just being taken off of the hustle and bustle. So the government is looking at that program being done in a very careful way, very strategic. They have also resorted to bringing back Anguillians and residents of Anguillians who've been overseas. We have students, for example, in the United States, the UK, and other Caribbean countries who wanted to come back. Plus a number of Anguillians and residents travel abroad very often to the United States and Europe and other Caribbean territories for medical reasons. up to today, up to this point, we've had about 300 persons who've been returned safely. Upon return, you go through the process, some very strict protocols, testing by the medical officials at the airport, and you go into some quarantine areas where you spend the 14-day period, you're tested, and once you're cleared after that 14-day cycle, then you go back out into the community. We've had Carnival,
can
at least
I interject here and ask you, James, Keith, and we'll get into some details on the quarantine because that's an issue that's big here in Grenada as well. Whether the people, do they have to pay for their stay in quarantine? Pay for their accommodation?
No.
So
up to now, the government has borne that cost, but they have come up with a new package now where they will be charging. But up to this point, the government has been bearing all the costs of the quarantine. But that is changing. That is going to change as of now.
All right, so let's slip across from Anguilla and see if we could hop over to Montserrat. And we have James White Jr. James, good evening. Another one of the stalwarts in the media industry in the Caribbean. Radio Antilles days, I swear, we just can't forget those names. How are things in Montserrat, COVID-wise?
Well, good evening, Odette, and to the other panelists. And just like Keith mentioned, we are part of that ongoing global viral pandemic of coronavirus, COVID-19, which was confirmed to have reached this British overseas territory on March 17th. And that significant milestone was St. Patrick's Day in Montserrat. And it actually was first uncovered here in Montserrat. Montserrat recorded some 13 confirmed cases of COVID-19 to date. 12 of those cases fully recovered, and 1 death was attributed to the virus. The first death, or the only death, occurred on April 24th, thereabout. By May 15th, all patients had recovered. Then on July 10th, a new case was discovered, and a subsequent other not too long after. Both individuals were taking what we refer to as routine tests for overseas travel. There was a big discussion here as to whether or not people were asymptomatic, meaning that they had the virus but weren't actually showing signs. And that created a situation where a number of additional tests were done, PCR tests were done, but there were no further reported cases. On August 7th, there were no active cases reported on island up to this point.
All right, so that's really good news there. And we're coming back to Montserrat, the place that we love. And we're going to St. Lucia. Alicia, both of us are hosting at One Caribbean Media Group of companies. So we're hosting, so we're going to St. Lucia and then we come to Trinidad. So Janeka, what's happening in St. Lucia? We have seen the CDC issuing one advisory today and then updating it a couple of days later. Tell us what's happening in St. Lucia.
Well, St. Lucia is doing quite well, as are many of the other smaller Caribbean territories. We had our first case of COVID-19 confirmed in March, the 13th of March to be exact. And since that day, we have had 26 cases with no deaths. Currently, we are not in any kind of lockdown situation. We do have a state of emergency, which is relatively controversial, in effect until the 30th of September. But we are proceeding with our phased reopening of the economy. So we have schools supposed to be reopening on the 7th of September. The early childhood development centers have also been approved for reopening. Our tourism reopening, the first phase has been extended, so we still have some restrictions there. Our public health officials are trying to limit the contact or potential contact between residents and visitors. And one why is that? Because we do not yet have any recorded confirmed case of community transmission. In fact, the last I would say 10 to 12 cases that we have recorded have been of incoming returning nationals who are in quarantine, and the cases have been picked up in quarantine. So St. Lucia is doing quite well. Our politicians have been praising themselves for the coronavirus response, and we have enjoyed, relative privilege in terms of being or remaining included in the UK travel corridor. So we don't have, as many restrictions as maybe other territories do in terms of travel.
All right. So, Janeka, I want to pick up on 2 points when we come back. You said that the state of emergency is controversial, and you're also saying that politicians have been praising themselves. Careful with your words. You journalists always put yourselves in trouble. Let's go to Alicia. Alicia.
That's not a problem. I'm used to it.
Let's go over to Trinidad. So, Alicia, you've just come out of an electoral cycle, and now we have PM really locking down the country again in some form and fashion, and he's saying now that your mask must be part of your outfit. Tell us about that.
Correct. Good evening, Odette, and good evening to all your viewers. So right now, Trinidad and Tobago is experiencing the second wave of the virus, because we would have had a few cases before. I think it was underneath 200, but many of those cases would have come in from cruise ships, more or less returning nationals. Those were stayed quarantined and treated. So we would have literally been placed at, I believe it was #1 in terms of countries dealing with COVID-19. Our caseload went down to 0. But right now, our figures, well, we do have a second wave, as I said, where we do have community spread. It started off with localized spread. Right now, we're at the community spread phase, and we just came out of the general election on August 10th. We would have seen a huge spike after that, and that was partly attributed to behavioral patterns during campaigning and so forth, as well as persons not necessarily heeding those warnings as they should. Parties, in terms of things like parties, pets, anything that allows you to congregate, boat rides, those things have been banned. Clubs are still closed. Those clubs were closed since the locking down of the economy the first time around. It's important to know that our borders remain closed, so we don't have any flights, we don't have any commercial flights coming to and from Trinidad, going to other countries, coming into Trinidad, except for certain exemptions that are being made. Right now, our figures stand at, in terms of positive cases, we've had 1,759 positive cases. Our active cases, however, right now is 1,061. Number of deaths, 22, and persons discharged, 676. The number of tests we've submitted to the Caribbean Public Health Agency so far is 23,651. Just Friday, Parliament reopened, and atop that agenda was bringing mandatory mask-wearing legislation. That legislation has been passed. It was assented to, and it is now law. So you are required to wear your mask in a public space. Not doing so carries it's a fixed penalty offense. So like for the first offense, you pay 1,000 TT. For the second offense, 2,000 TT. And you can even face jail time depending on how many times you are caught carrying out that offense of not wearing a mask. In terms of even in your vehicle, because we do have a situation in Trinidad that we have what we call PH drivers. Those are drivers that are not registered taxi drivers. However, they take their private cars and they will taxis on the road. So initially it was considered that they were not going to, make mask wearing in your cars, especially if it's your private car, and it may be a family that's traveling, they're not going to impose that. However, that was reconsidered because there is a possibility that someone takes their private car and works taxi on the road, and then when they are caught, they just find a loophole around that. So I was out today monitoring the situation. Most people were complying. However, we did have one or two people that weren't wearing the mask in a proper fashion, like some people literally had it under their chin. And of course, that just defeats the entire purpose of it.
And I'm sure that's a common problem that we have across the region. And in Grenada, we have that issue as well. So we will delve deeper into some of the issues that we have touched on, but we need to take a commercial break. One of the things I'd like probably Keith to break down for me is why it is Caribbean people love to party so much. We hear Trinidad, that's a common theme running through what happened in Jamaica. So this is Beyond the Headlines. We will continue to delve into some of those issues as we look at COVID-19, getting a Caribbean update from our panelists in Anguilla, Montserrat, Trinidad, Tobago, and St. Lucia. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.
WHO recommends that all women should be supported to breastfeed. If COVID-19 is suspected or confirmed, these hygiene measures can help protect the baby. Washing your hands before breastfeeding, coughing or sneezing into a tissue and disposing of it immediately. Cleaning and disinfecting surfaces you have touched. Wearing a mask where possible. If a mask is not available, WHO still recommends breastfeeding, as benefits outweigh the potential risk of transmitting the virus.
Looking for quality herbs and herbal supplements, or are you thinking about having a complete body cleanse to jumpstart your health? Then no need to look further. Visit Nirvana Natural Health Clinic, Detox Center, and Natural Health Store. We carry a wide range of herbal products for kidney and gallstone cleansing, male sexual enhancement formulas, asthma and sinusitis, gas and bloating, acid reflux, constipation, arthritis, imbalanced hormones, female health issues, liver cleansing, weight loss, and so much more. Also available, colonic irrigation, holistic health consultations, essential oils, and diffusers. Look out for our online natural health store coming soon. Call 231-6642 418-7115 or 449-7753 to find out about our delivery options or to book an appointment. Visit us at Belmont St. George's, close to the Fallage, Monday to Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Nirvana Natural Health Clinic. Detox your way to health.
It's what's inside that counts. Inside your house, that is. With Beacon, you can ensure everything inside your home with our Easy Buy contents packages. Just click, match, and buy for maximum peace of mind with minimum fuss. Log on to beacon.co.tt and choose your package today.
Are you looking for quality herbs and herbal supplements, or are you thinking about having a complete body cleanse to jumpstart your health? Then no need to look further. Visit Nirvana Natural Health Clinic Detox Center and Natural Health Store. We carry a wide range of herbal products for kidney and gallstone cleansing, male sexual enhancement formulas, asthma and sinusitis, gas and bloating, acid reflux, constipation, arthritis, imbalanced hormones, female health issues, liver cleansing, weight loss, and so much more. Also available, colonic irrigation, holistic health consultations, essential oils, and diffusers. Look out for our online natural health store coming soon. Call 231-6642 for 18-7115 or 449-7753 to find out about our delivery options or to book an appointment. Visit us at Belmont St. George's, close to the Fallage, Monday to Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Nirvana Natural Health Clinic. Detox your way to health.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. This evening, we're looking at COVID-19, getting a Caribbean update, and we have our colleagues from across the region this evening with us. We already had Milton Walker from Jamaica, who's had to leave because of a busy electoral schedule. And we have with us Mr. Keystone Greaves out of Anguilla, with James White out of Montserrat, Alicia Boucher out of Trinidad and Tobago, and Janeka Simon out of St.Luica. Janeka, you were saying that the state of emergency has been controversial. Why so?
Well, the state of emergency legislation that was passed has, quite a lot of latitude given to our central government in terms of things that they can do, under the aegis of the state of emergency. For example, the SOE legislation gives the government the authority to commandeer property, to confine people, to give, and this is a big one, to give tenders, without needing to go through the competitive bidding process. And when the SOE was initially passed, this was, a couple of months ago, people were nervous, people were not sure what the pandemic would bring to our shores. The opposition parliamentarians kind of cautiously said that, we're going to give the government leeway to do what they think they need to do. And that initial SOE was in effect for a period of a few weeks. I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks. Before it expired, the government came back and said, listen, we want to extend that until September. Now, at that time, we were already kind of in a situation where we didn't see any massive caseload. There was no community spread. There was no overwhelm of our public health systems. So people really started to question the need for this state of emergency, because the Governor General can declare a state of emergency just by gazetting it. So he could do this overnight, and then Parliament would have to meet to ratify and extend that SOE. So the argument there was, in the absence of any compelling reason to have that SOE for public health protection, why not let it naturally expire, and then if needs be, the Governor General could always just declare a new one. And the government's argument in terms of retaining and extending that SOE was because they thought that they needed to maintain readiness for a potential spike or a noticeable spike. So it is, I think it's fair to call it controversial, although by now the population is kind of resigned to just, waiting it out and hoping that Parliament will not come back before September 30th to extend it, because just like in all of our sister territories, our parliamentary democracy is such that the government of the day holds a majority in the parliament, and so they can pass legislation without needing the help of anybody else. So people were just a little bit concerned about the sweeping powers that are granted to the central government. And, we've seen road tenders go out. We've seen huge sums of money be awarded in terms of contract without any public tendering. This was already an issue for St. Lucia, and it seems to have accelerated using the SOE and using the exigencies of the global pandemic to, facilitate that.
All right. And you mentioned people being nervous. Let me go to our other panelists and ask what has been the response from the initial stages and as we progress through this. And let's go to Keith in Anguilla. Keith, how have Anguillans generally responded to this? Were they fearful of the virus at first, and then the regulations and its implications? How have people responded thus far?
Well, certainly. Lots of apprehension from day one. Even up to now, there's still a lot of folks who are very, very, very concerned, who get very, very tight of just by mentioning COVID-19. But as it was the situation in Anguilla, initially, everyone clamored, everyone stayed in, adhered to the advice that were given, because no one knew what was happening or until more information became available. I was saying before we went to the break that we had, normally in July is our summer festival where we mix carnival, jam and wine with our national sport here, which is boat racing. We still had our boat races this year, and we still had our street jump ups. We didn't have our major shows like the Calypso show and the Queen show and the like, but we still had about 3 jams on the roads. But people, even with the jams, people took control of themselves, and you had the spacing, you had the social and physical distancing. A lot of information, a lot of literature was given during the jump ups. Information on the radio stations going out. So you had that. But people still are very, very apprehensive, particularly those in the older folks. The younger people are still, some of them are still not quite getting it, but the older people seem to be very concerned. We'd have some church meetings and gatherings, and you could clearly see people have been withdrawn, even with the physical and social distancing practices. So the apprehension is still there, still very much alive.
All right. So, James, over in Montserrat, how have things been in terms of people's sense of well-being?
Well, let me go from the beginning when I stated that March 17th was normally St. Patrick's Day, where we usually have thousands of people coming on island. And had that gone through, had it not been cancelled by the government, I think we would have had a more widespread impact in terms of the virus, infections of the virus. Now, people adhered very well to the lockdown measures and, of course, the curfew periods that were set by the government to restrict wanton movement of people and into the community where you have people coming together without social distancing and so on. So what actually took place is that the government set about, coming up with standard rules and order, SRNOs, and those were adjusted monthly. So they added or subtracted, as the case may be, some of the guidelines or protocols that they wanted to institute to ensure that people kept their distance and to curtail the spread of the virus. People have been generally adhering to the protocols, but there were instances where persons breached the protocols, and of course the police, they were given the powers, or they have the powers, to arrest those persons based on the standard statutory rules and orders, I beg your pardon. So the government of Montserrat, they've been doing very well in terms of, explaining to people what they should do in order to keep themselves safe, the protocols, social distancing, the wearing of face masks and so on, face coverings and so on. You have buses when people were given the okay to travel on buses. And more recently, there was this protocol that was intensified by the government, where persons entering supermarkets and other business places, they made it mandatory that these persons wear face coverings. And I heard somebody mention earlier that there were charges issued. And what is happening in Montserrat, $500 for the first offense, and for a repeat offense, $1,000. But people have been taking that in stride, because the business owners are saying that they should not be the ones to be paying those fines. It should be the people who are coming into their establishments without the proper face coverings.
So clarify for us, James. So clarify for us. If you go into a supermarket without a mask, they charge the supermarket owner and not the person who went in without a mask?
Yes, and that is what is causing the bone of contention, because the supermarket owners are basically saying that should not be us, because we can tell those persons not to come into the supermarket, and maybe we are distracted for a moment, and then these people coming into the supermarket unknowing to us. How then can you charge us for that instead of charging the person? What they can do is to call the police. And they have been threatened also with closing the supermarket for a month. So those are just some of the things that are happening. In terms of the hospitality industry and tourism sector and small businesses, those were the ones who have suffered most and are still suffering. The government of Montserrat, they negotiated what we call a stimulus package with the British government of £2.5 million. That's the equivalent of just over 8 million EC dollars, to provide COVID response and to provide some sort of relief for vulnerable households and also individuals. But, the government has set up programs where they had food packages being issued initially, and then later on financial assistance to individuals and to households, and of course to some of the businesses. The tourism and hospitality sector, they were the ones benefiting first, because with the closure of the borders, they were the ones who were impacted first. And so the government decided to give those persons those financial assistance and so on. But what has happened is that a number of those small businesses and individuals, they have not up to this point received some of that assistance. And it was closed at the end of July.
Right.
So the government is saying basically that they're going to see how best they can assist those individuals who never benefited from the £2.5 million stimulus package.
And that's a big ticket item. And before we take a commercial break, if I could ask Alicia to speak to us in about 45 seconds. How do you compare the Trinidad response? We've heard people being nervous in the various islands, but yet in Trinidad and Jamaica, you guys full of vibe and action, verve. The bars have been, kicking up a storm, and you seem not to be worried at all. How does that compare?
Well, I would say that in the first phase, in the first wave of the virus, when the country was locked down, people really took that seriously. The road, it was like a ghost town. And I think that's because, you know, we would have had a lot of cases, well, not a lot of cases, but we would have had cases coming in, and those were more from returning nationals. People weren't, you know, sure as to what was happening in the public domain. But when we got down to zero, I think people just became, or some people that is became very comfortable. So when the economy started reopening, and the narrative was it's reopening under the new normal, there were people that wanted to go back to the old normal. And the bars, that is one of the areas that we in Trinidad, we've had a lot of complaints. Police have had to intervene. Because, you know, bars, they were restricted to numbers and so forth that they weren't necessarily listening to. So that whole party atmosphere, that, and then you couple that with the alcohol. And so we've really had a challenge in dealing with that. At one point, they allowed bars to open until 8. Then they pushed that back to 10. And then they had to scale it back down to 8 o'clock. Again, in terms of the closure. So, but as the cases now continue to rise, and as we continue to see communities spread, I think people are getting back there in terms of, you know, not taking their health for granted, although we do still have, you know, there's a narrative sometimes, God is a Trini, and some people attach themselves to that mentality. And it's a bit hard to break, but, you know, government has time and time again try to hammer into citizens that what we do need to battle this virus, it would be behavioral changes. I think I exceeded the 45 seconds, but
we got that there. So I'm very happy for this discussion tonight, because a lot of the issues that have been touched on, we realized that we've had our own set of struggles in Grenada. There's one phrase I won't want to repeat from my St. Lucian friend about politicians and the way they've responded to the way they have responded to this. This is Beyond the Headlines on GBN Television. We'll take a commercial break and we'll be right back.
Whoa! Did you hear that? The National Lotteries Authority's Lotto jackpot is $238,000. Play Lotto today for chances at winning big. Lotto. Play and win a lot of money.
A pleasant evening to everyone. Welcome to the National Lotteries Authority's Lotto draw number 3108 for today, Monday, August 31st, 2020. I am Alicia Charles. With me this evening is Ms. Makiba Bain from PKF Accountants and Business Advisors, whose purpose is to ensure that this show is conducted in an accountable manner, and the game balls with industry standards and in no way tampered with. At this time, we should have tickets at hand because we are about to play for a jackpot of $238,000. But first, you have free ticket letter. Good luck. This evening's free ticket letter is check your tickets. Your free ticket letter for this evening is a K as in key. Let's proceed for 5 winning numbers. Good luck.
First number this evening is check your tickets in the meantime. First number up is 17. Second number is 22. Third number up. Third number is 34, followed by 7. Fifth and final number. Final number is 4.
Please recap those numbers. Check your tickets. First number up is 17. The second, 22. Third, 34. Followed by 7. Fifth and final is 4. So that's 1717, 2222, 3434, 077, and 044. Your free ticket letter for this evening is K, as in key. Congratulations to all the winners of this evening's Lotto draw. Lotto, play and win a lot. Remember, when you play all the games of the National Lotteries Authority, support sports, culture, and the nation building. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
Get high making money moves with the NLA's new Aces High Scratch game with 4 chances to win. Beat the dealer's card to win the prize shown. Reveal an A symbol. And just like that, you are automatically a winner. Scratch away to win the top prize of $10,000. Win easy with Scratch. Must be 18 or older to play.
Get away from your daily stress with a Grenada vacation at the Cuyaba Beach Resort. Cuyaba is located on the world-famous Grand Anse Beach and boasts 5.5 acres of beautiful garden. We offer excellent service, good food and drink, well-appointed rooms and friendly staff in a safe environment. Facilities include 2 restaurants, 2 bars, swimming pool, water sports, tennis, gym, and body treatment rooms. Call 473-444-4129.
Use Clay, it washing cleaner than ever. Oh mama, oi, oh mama, oi. In every household, must have it oi. Highly effective, stain removal, lemon freshness, antibacterial washing powder. Fresh and clean, fresh and clean. When I put on me clothes, me must win. When I wash me clothes, no other detergent could ever wash me clothes like this.
Now buy 3 bottles of Clay's dishwashing liquid for only $8. Available at Best for Less Supermarket, Eat Fresh Supermarket, M&C Jones Supermarket, Hope Pride Supermarket, The Food Fairs, Carinage and Grand Anse, Roberts Enterprise, Springs Food Mart, and Charlo Supermarket.
Other Clay's products available: hand sanitizer, fabric softener, hand washing liquid, dishwashing liquid, and toilet cleaners. Distributed by Fortune Foods Company Limited, Tempe St. George.
Total is one of the world's largest oil companies with a top quality line of lubricants. Total Lubricants has a full product line from passenger cars, motorcycle, heavy industrial equipment, mining, trucking, agriculture, and manufacturing machines and vehicles. Total Lubricants, winning championships in motorsports, including Formula 1 and World Rally Championships. Total Lubricants are available at all Rubis service stations, leading automotive shops, and distributed by Huggins.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. Just in case you joined us late this evening, we're looking at COVID-19, looking for a Caribbean update, a Caribbean perspective. We have out of Anguilla, Mr. Let's see now, out of Anguilla, yes, Keystone Greaves is there. Out of Montserrat, we have James White Jr. Out of Trinidad and Tobago, we have Alicia Boucher and Janeka Simon out of St.Luica. And we have looked at a number of issues thus far, and we've seen some commonalities. So, Keith, out of Anguilla, who is fined, or you have a mask wearing policy, which is part of a regulation? Should I clarify?
No, we don't, it's optional at the moment. It's optional at the moment. Persons are encouraged to, if you so desire, but it's not a directive. Even though some persons, particularly those for small gatherings, because we're still into the very small gatherings for church events and other activities, are encouraged to use it. Sometimes in the supermarkets, the persons are told that they can use it, but it's not mandatory, at least just yet.
All right. And James, in Montserrat, as far as mask wearing is concerned, what is your guideline there?
Okay, the guideline here is that you should always wear face coverings, masks, or there are some face coverings that have been made by some people. They should be worn, or they've been encouraged to wear those in shared public spaces. But as I mentioned, in recent times, they've put that restriction now onto persons entering public establishments, supermarkets, banks, even government offices where people are doing business. The authorities have made that mandatory for persons to wear face coverings when entering these establishments.
And what is the fine, James, if you refuse to wear the mask?
Well, the fine, as I mentioned, the establishments would be taking that up. It would be $500 on the first offense, and if there's to be a repeat offense, it would be $1,000.
All right. So, Janeka, in St. Lucia, what applies as far as mask wearing? Mandatory fine applies?
Well, you know, I was just listening to the other panelists, and I cannot even remember what the fine is for not wearing your mask. It is so rarely enforced. Masks are supposed to be mandatory in the public, in establishments. What I have noticed is that the business houses do enforce mask wearing. So, for example, at the supermarket, we have one major brand of supermarkets in terms of the chain. You must have your face covering. The security will prevent you from coming inside if you don't. In other business houses, the security will remind you and make sure that you're wearing it. However, you know, we don't really have a major law enforcement response. Our public health officials have, although the regulations are there, because under our state of emergency, we have statutory instruments that are rolled out with, you know, whatever the regulation of the day is. So it is a requirement, but we don't really have a law enforcement response per se.
So let's go to the issue of churches. And let me start in Trinidad. What is the status of churches now, Alicia?
All right, so churches or religious gatherings, they're banned at the moment. However, if they are allowed to stream services to their members behind closed doors. So there can be a maximum of 10 people set up. You know, once they comply with the physical distancing and all the rest of the COVID-19 guidelines under the public health regulations, once they comply with that, they can go ahead and, you know, set up their service and stream it to their audiences or to their members. But in terms of gatherings like you normally have religious gatherings, that is not allowed.
And weddings and funerals?
Weddings and funerals are restricted to 10 persons. Before, we did have a problem where they gave that amount, but what you had was 10 persons coming in and leaving, and another 10 persons entering for the same wedding or the same funeral. And they've since then clarified that, and that it's 10 persons entirely. So, but of course, you have to physically distance yourself and wear a mask and all of those things. So, on the issue of masks that you just touched on, though, I wanted to just also note that the mandatory wearing mask regulations, it was revealed today that even children from 8 years old and over, they can be fined, especially if they are by themselves. If they're not, and there was a parent or a guardian, and that person isn't making them wear a mask, the adult can be fined. But if the child is by themselves, the child can be fined.
So, Alicia, let's just go back to this whole issue of the funerals and the numbers. I mean, you have me cracking up. So 10 people will come in and leave another 10 people. We understood earlier o'clock, Alicia, that some of the bars would be closed, but drinks were being passed through the windows. I mean, Trinidadians have a high IQ, man.
Well, you know, there is a narrative. But we tend to find ways to work around a lot of things. So government has had to consider a lot in terms of the drafting of legislation because there are persons who would find those loopholes and get around them.
So, Kate, I see you smiling there. You've had some workarounds in Anguilla as well?
Give me that again.
Have you had some very high IQ nationals in Anguilla working around some of the regulations?
That always happens. That's why I was smiling. That always happens. But what I'm noticing from my other colleagues is that in Anguilla, initially you had this clamping down or this tightening. But within the last few months, because of the COVID-free status, right? No active cases in Anguilla, that has been widely reported, as I said, by WHO and PAHO. We are seeing things are sort of relaxed. For example, the face coverings, we don't see too much of that. One or two individuals. The churches, for example, initially you had, it was restricted to between 10 and 15 individuals. Now I'm seeing an expansion. One of the points, though, that is carefully adhered to is the physical distancing. In the churches, the benches, the pews are clearly spaced, and persons are asked to sit at certain distance, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 feet apart. That has not changed. That I've noticed over the past few months that has certainly continued. So that is one of the noticeable things. The bars, but they continue their business much like normal. Restaurants, the supermarkets, no face coverings and the like. The banks, for example, initially you had a tightening. But just today I was in the bank and I saw you still have a few markers, you still have the markers on the floor saying this is your space and the distancing, but that's about it. So yeah, again, I'm seeing a little relaxing and some people are beginning, I would dare say, getting a little complacent. Every now and then the authorities would come out with something that say, look, we're getting, you're lapsing, you need to tighten up.
All right. I want to go to the issue of stimulus packages. James mentioned that there was a stimulus package that was set up in Montserrat. James, you were making the point, is it that people did not use up the money or the money was insufficient? What was that point again?
I think it was a combination of both. And it was really challenging in the fact that there are a number of persons, for whatever reason or reasons, they were deemed ineligible. And even if you're deemed ineligible for a particular package, you must be guided in a particular direction to gain some sort of assistance. But there was a backlog of more than 300 such applications, and that really created a bottleneck, and a number of persons were unable to get the assistance that they needed. And when it ended, there was still a number of persons who never really benefited.
So how much was each employee entitled to?
Well, it's dependent on your case. They would do an assessment of your situation, and then they would give you. The business sector, for instance, they had a $10,000 stimulus package, and this would enable them to pay their bills and to pay their workers. Individuals who were channeled through the social services department, they would get $900 for an individual, and depending on the number of persons in the household, there would be additional monies, $300, $500 on that initial $900. So it varies.
All right. Janeka, what applies in St. Lucia as far as the stimulus package is concerned?
Well, we have not had a named stimulus package. What we have had is unemployment relief or income support. And this is primarily aimed at people who have lost their jobs in the tourism industry as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have an estimate of somewhere in the region of 13 to 15,000 people who were directly employed in the tourism industry not being at work. Because of our phase one reopening, about 2,000 of those people have gone back to work. You can do the math and realize that that still leaves the vast majority of people unemployed. And these are only people that were directly employed in the industry by hotels or what have you. This does not count everybody who is affiliated in terms of, taxi drivers, so on. So there is a lot of income loss here in St. Lucia, and the National Insurance Corporation actually gave central government quite a big gift. They have undertaken to fund this unemployment relief program that gives a maximum of 1,500 EC dollars monthly for people who have lost their jobs. And that is, it was supposed to be an initial 3 months. They've since extended it to 6 months, but that is due to come to an end in September. And that is a source of anxiety for quite a lot of St. Lucians, because if you look at things, the phase one reopening is extended, and so we will not have our hotels back up and running by September 30th. And so then what happens to people who are still unemployed? The moratoria that have been extended by banks and credit unions is going to come to an end as well in next month or in October. And so, there is a lot of economic anxiety among the populace, because people are not really seeing a return to normalcy anytime soon, but yet the small relief in terms of financial relief is not going to extend for much longer. Central government also came in with a relief, an unemployment or income support program. So this was people who were not NIC contributors, but who had lost jobs, as a result of the pandemic, were eligible for the central government's program. In terms of raw numbers, we have not really had that information from our central government. How many people applied? How many people were approved? We've had that from the NIC, but the overarching complaints from people have been late payments. It took a couple of months actually to get the first payment going. Things I think have smoothed out as time has gone on. But the second issue is that the unemployment relief was really a percentage of what you were making when you had your job. So people were saying that, listen, the maximum that we can get is $1,500, but if I was making $3,000, that still leaves a huge hole in my finances, and the bills are still due, the rent is still due, so people are undergoing some significant financial distress here in St. Lucia, and central government really has not laid out a plan for what is going to happen when those relief programs run out.
Great. We have a caller on the line who's been very patient. Caller, good evening.
Good night to you, and to all the other persons on the station. And I really want to thank you all for giving us an update from all the other islands. But I must say that I'm comparing what is happening in Grenada with what happened with other countries, I thought Grenada did very well. The kind of rumors that we're hearing and things that we're hearing from people in Grenada, it shows that Grenada really did very, very well in comparison. In terms of not obeying the rules and regulations, we see that all the countries seem to have people that not obeying. But it gives the impression here that it's only Grenada that wasn't not obeying. But here we're hearing now that all the other countries had delinquent people. So I thought Grenada did very well in all the cases, while there are some problems in Grenada, and there are some of the things that the government may not have put in place properly. But I think Grenada did very well in comparison to hearing what happened to the other countries.
Thank you so much for that contribution. Alicia, we have not heard from you in terms of stimulus package and economic support. What has been put in place in Trinidad and Tobago?
So during the first wave, when government locked down the country, the economy, there were a number of initiatives from the social ministry, and that would have included food cards, a top up on food cards, which would have allowed people to access, food. Also, religious bodies did get funding so that they would have been able to buy food and distribute to their members. Of course, there was an accounting system, so they had to ensure that they retain those bills before they receive the second tranche of funding in order to be able to continue. I think it was done in 3 tranches. Government did also give rental assistance, and that would have supplemented rent, I believe, up to $1,500. There was also a salary assistance where persons may have been working, they may have lost their jobs, or they may have had a reduced salary as they were not working as many hours. So that was just meant to supplement it. It's a similar situation to St. Lucia, where we did have some persons saying that they did not receive the packages in terms of they didn't get the grants. And that would have been for a number of issues. Either they filled out the forms incorrectly. Also, there were issues in terms of slow payments. What we also did have, which was, I guess, an impediment in some situations, would have been fraud. So right now, the Ministry of Social Development, they have been investigating those fraudulent cases where you would have had persons trying to do what they call double dipping. So if you would have been getting a national insurance grant, you may not have qualified for another type of assistance, but you would have had people trying to get both, giving fraudulent information. So those things are under investigation. Now that the economy has relatively reopened, that assistance, that has been cut. Of course, with this new wave, we have persons now clamoring for assistance because, take for instance, taxi drivers, where they now have to once again operate at half capacity. So you have a taxi that is taking 4 persons. However, those taxis can only now take 2 persons, and then they're not receiving assistance for gas at the moment. Taxi drivers initially were given a grant. I believe it was $2,000 or thereabouts. They were initially given a grant to supplement that loss of income, and they have once again, that was in the first phase, they've once again been clamoring for that, or some type of fuel waiver to make that make sense for them, because according to them, it's not making sense to. It's not working out economically. So basically, that's what we have. Those packages, as I said, since the reopening of the economy, they've been stopped, and we're just government has not closed the economy back down with this second wave because of what we would have seen in terms of the economic fallout during the first wave, and some have even questioned whether or not we would be able to manage with a second closure of the economy in what we saw for the first wave of COVID-19 in Trinidad.
Thank you so much. Very comprehensive report. And unfortunately, we are out of time. We only have time for wrap-up comments of 15 seconds from each of our panelists this evening. And as we wrap it up, just to let us know that Havana's governor announced an overnight curfew ban on travel from the Cuban capital to other provinces and greater restrictions on the circulation of vehicles in a bid to curb a new peak of the coronavirus cases. The new measures come into effect from September 1st for 15 days. And Mr. Reynaldo Garcia Zapata said that at some point the situation will be reassessed. And that's news coming out of Cuba, the regulations taking effect from tomorrow. So this is indeed a situation that is impacting all of our Caribbean islands. So Keystone Greaves, we start with you, wrap-up comments, your thoughts as you leave us this evening, leave Grenada, leave the Caribbean, and this is being across the world.
Thank you very much. Well, it was good being on with you and with your listeners this evening and sharing with colleagues from across the region. Anguilla, as I said, getting into the soft opening, looking at trying to get some funds into the country. Britain, of course, has provided some support to the tune of over $100 million. Some support too from the Social Security Board for persons who've been heavily impacted, particularly those in the hospitality sector. But Anguilla, still with its COVID-free status, is battling on and hoping to, like the rest of the region and indeed the rest of the world, that COVID-19 will just fade away and we can get back to the new norm, so to speak. Thank you very kindly.
Welcome, James White Jr.
Well, unlike Keith, I am being very cautious with the use of COVID-free. I would prefer to say that there are no confirmed cases because we never know. We might have the asymptomatic ones still around. But what I think that we need to do, not only in Montserrat, but in the other islands of the region, is to reassess the situation. I think a lot of us, our governments, were caught off guard in terms of how they were going to respond to COVID-19. And of course, some mistakes were made. And I think now is the opportune time for them to reassess and to put proper strategies in place to deal with, as Trinidad and St. Lucia mentioned, the possibility, and Jamaica, of a second wave. Because what we are seeing now is that there are hot spots and there are spikes showing up in a number of the islands. And we need to be able to manage it effectively. Our health systems are under strain. They need the necessary resources. And I just pray that we will just work together, having all hands on deck, and then we are able to fight and overcome this adversity.
Janeka, your closing thoughts this evening as we wrap up?
Well, it was just really interesting to hear from the other journalists on the panel about what is going on in their respective countries. It seems that, the Caribbean party spirit is indomitable, and no matter what is happening in the world, a global pandemic notwithstanding, we will still find a way to have fun and enjoy ourselves. However, I think in the countries where we have been relatively unscathed, we are seeing, personal, the personal responsibility and people making sure that they are practicing good public health protocols. We are relaxing, we are lapsing, and for a journalist that is looking at spikes in other territories and around the world, it's a bit worrying or troubling, because if, one case kind of escapes into the wild, then we will really be quite vulnerable to having, a massive spike. And I think that, this program is really excellent because it allows, the Grenadian people to understand, in the case of, Trinidad, Jamaica, Bahamas, Puerto Rico, USVI, that you really must maintain your vigilance and, just a good reminder to make sure that you are protecting and yourself and your family.
And Alicia, where all the action takes place in South, in Port of Spain, you're going to close us out this evening. I'm sorry Milton is gone. We just saw the action in Jamaica at the start of the program. Alicia, what are you saying to your countrymen and women and to our Caribbean people looking at you for an example?
I would use the old adage that says prevention is better than cure, and you cannot allow yourself to become complacent or comfortable, because, as I said, we got to 0 cases, and right now we are at 1,061 with community spread. So government can put as many things as they want in place, but without personal responsibility, and the examples are there, in so many other countries in the world that do have health systems that cannot cope with the rising number of cases or even the amount of deaths that they are seeing on a daily basis. So I would just really underscore the need for personal responsibility. It was a great program. I was educated and very well informed, and it made me just realize that, and I'll just echo something that the Prime Minister would have said today, that we're all in this together, because we are facing very similar situations despite us being, miles and miles apart. So basically, I just want to tell everyone, if you don't have to go out, stay home. And if you are staying home, and if you are going out, do the responsible thing, because at the end of the day, the onus is on you to safeguard your health.
Thank you so much. And to our panelists this evening, I want to say that I feel deeply indebted to you for taking the time to join us this evening. We know that all of you started at about 7 o'clock or even earlier this morning, but you have stuck with us to this hour, as we call it, the graveyard shift in the media. And we just want to say a very special thank you to Milton Walker out of TVJ in Jamaica, who had to leave us because it's the silly season in Jamaica. It's the electoral cycle in full swing. We have James White Jr. out of Montserrat, Alicia Boucher out of Trinidad, a place where the action happens all the time, Keithstone Greaves out of Anguilla, and Janeka James out of St.Luica. We want to thank you very kindly. Let me just clarify. Keith, are you from Montserrat originally or no?
Yes, born and bred.
Born and bred. And James White Jr., you're Montserratian as well?
Certainly.
So
we trod the paths together.
And I'm giving you 5 seconds to send a shout out to your boy Lou, both of you.
Oh, yeah. Man, I don't even know what to say, man. News director, good buddy, friend, colleague. I don't know. It's just, Lou is just a great individual, and all shout out to him.
Yes, certainly to Lou, and of course my good buddy Ray Roberts.
Definitely. I just feel honored. I feel blessed to have had you guys in my company this evening. And we have some viewers who have been saying thank you sincerely. That we've been able to see some commonalities and realize that we're not just in this alone with some of the issues that we've been confronting. And we want to thank you, Grenada. Thanks you sincerely for doing this. To all of you who have viewed the program, to those of you in the diaspora, we want to thank you sincerely. And until next week, I'm Odette Campbell. On behalf of the entire production team who really worked hard to put this together this evening, I am forever grateful. God bless you, and we'll see you again next week. So long for now.